Hello. Welcome to Community Matters. I am honored to be here with you for the next 2 hours. Pardon me. And I am extremely honored to have as my guest here in the studio today Mr. Sandy Lydon, a very well-known local historian. And we are here today to talk about what happened in our county and the area 36 years ago today when the Loma Prieta Earthquake came about at 5:04 p.m. So let's see, Sandy, do you want to do, I'm going to ask you to introduce yourself. You are just an amazing person, and I'm very honored and grateful that you've taken time to be here today with us. Please introduce yourself for the callers on the rare occasion that they do not know who you are.
Well, I'm a member of the Hollister Hay Baylor Hall of Fame. That's how I try to introduce myself these days, but not for baseball, but for being an educator. I'm a teacher. I started teaching high school in 1961, and then came to Cabrillo College in 1968, and had taught there even after I retired, continued to teach until 2015. So it's almost 60-something years of being in the classroom and being all over the place, and I'm nosy.
Curious.
Yeah, well, that's a nice way of putting it. And as my dad often said, he said one day, he said, you cast a big wake as you move across this place. And I hadn't thought of it that way. But I've been very fortunate to be an educator here for as long as I have been. I continue to be, I believe.
Yes.
And I spell teacher with a capital T.
Thank you.
If realtors can use a capital R, I can use a capital T. And I've been trying to figure this place out for, almost 60 years. And I don't think I have yet. I think I kind of understand it. It is a very complex. It's and I've traveled all over the world, and I've gone to all kinds of different places, and I keep coming back saying, yeah, this place is different. And it is different. It is the second smallest county in the state, and denied being the smallest by the city and county of San Francisco. And the third smallest county in the state is San Mateo. So the peninsula from the Golden Gate south to Monterey Bay are the three smallest counties in the state. I was born in San Mateo. My paternal family was there. All of my aunts and uncles on my father's side and my father were born there, and all of my brothers and sisters were born in San Mateo. So we're San Mateo people in the beginning. And I was born in the same hospital as Tom Brady, the football player. That doesn't, maybe they have a plaque, I think, on his door. They don't have a plaque on where I was born, however. And
Yet.
Oh, no. This is my turf. Although I have to say that having the background in San Mateo County, and particularly in the Santa Cruz Mountains, my family, my paternal grandfather was brought out from Milwaukee in the teens to build a golf course for the Jewish community in San Francisco. He was Irish Catholic, but he was apparently very famous for building and nurturing golf courses. And the Jewish community in San Francisco wanted to build their own golf course because they weren't allowed to play at the Olympic Club and all the existing golf courses in San Francisco. So they built their own. It's called the Beresford Golf and Country Club. And my grandfather was the original manager of the golf course. So, my aunts and uncles grew up on a golf course. My dad grew up on a golf course, but they built a summer home over on the Pescadero side in a small enclave over there known as the Butno. And if you hear anybody pronounce it any other way, it's locally pronounced Butno, not Butano. Anyway, the Butno. And so in the summers, my grandfather died early, and in the summers I would spend part of each summer with my grandmother out in the Butno. And so I got to roam and fish and hang out as a kid.
Nice.
In the Santa Cruz Mountains before, and then in 1950, I went to Beresford Park School, grammar school, South San Mateo, and then we moved in 1950. We moved to Hollister because my father was going to be in the agricultural extension service, and he had been the farm advisor here in Santa Cruz. We lived here momentarily. He'd been the farm advisor here along with Henry Washburn, very famous, one of the first farm advisors in the state, actually.
Yeah.
Early on, and then he was a photographer. Henry was. And then my dad joined the Navy at the beginning of the war, and we moved back ultimately to San Mateo. So, so I have a little bit of all of our doctors and dentists, family doctors and dentists, were here in Santa Cruz. So even though we lived in Hollister, we came to the dentist and doctors that they knew from the very beginning, And so, from the first 10 years of my life, I was not in what we would call really actively seismic country. South San Mateo, not so much. San Andreas runs along the ridge, and over on the west side of the Santa Cruz Mountains. So we were over on the Bay Meadows racetrack, El Camino side of the mountain. So there wasn't a lot of seismic. I don't remember any, actually, during that first 10 years. But the second 10 years of my life, from the age of 10 to 20, when Hollister was my home, that was very different. You need to know that Hollister is one of the more seismically active places anywhere. They have dozens of earthquakes each month, mostly magnitudes 1s and 2s, and not noticeable. Not noticeable if there's a wind blowing. When we first moved there, we lived in a 2-story house, that wood frame house built in the 20s, right on Main Street, that had an attic bedroom where the peak of the attic had been turned into a bedroom, which was my bedroom, which was just a wonderful thing. But I'm way up off the ground. And during the first couple of months, I kept thinking, because it was Main Street, at San Benito Street, I thought, well, there's a lot of traffic. There's a lot of trucks going by here. And so one day I mentioned that to my folks when I was downstairs. I said, what? Why are there so many trucks? They said, oh, that's not trucks. That's just earthquakes.
Just earthquakes.
Just earthquakes. That phrase stuck with me. It still sticks with me. It's just earthquakes. Okay. So over time, in order to allay our fears, I had a younger brother and sister. My folks started a game. We play a game, and the game was if there was an earthquake. If there was an earthquake, there was always an earthquake. And it was, noticeable. If the dishes shook and the glasses clinked in the cupboard, then we'd go into the living room, and there was a chandelier. It was inoperable, been there a million years, but it would swing. It would swing. And then we would play a game called magnitude and epicenter. What was the magnitude and what was the epicenter? And so we'd stand there and say, 3.2 Morgan Hill, or whatever it was. And of course, there's so many faults running through Hollister. That's why it's seismically active.
Yeah.
So I became what I called an earthquake cowboy. That is, for me, they were an event to play with. I would talk to them. Sometimes if there was nobody else around and I was up in my bedroom and the bedroom started to shake, and I'd start a conversation with the earthquake and tell it to knock it off or whatever. That's the place where I learned about earthquake weather. Now, you've got to understand, I am not a practicing, I'm a practicing seismologist, but I'm an amateur. I don't have a license. Gary Griggs often likes to mention that I'm practicing seismology without a license. But I'm a closet seismologist. And so the people in Hollister have learned how to live with this. All right. And for them, it's an everyday occasion. And the broken curb lines and the places where the faulting is actually apparent in the ground, that's nothing to people from Hollister. And one of the things we learned early on, that they talked about earthquake weather. And in the morning, if the day is, Hollister's a very windy place. So
yes,
the wind is always the wind is going from the ocean to Pacheco Pass. It wants to go there, and so there's always a west wind, and there's always rustling of leaves and trees and stuff. But if it ever wasn't windy, and particularly on a warm, still day, you automatically said, earthquake weather. Well, the seismologists say, no, earthquakes don't cause weather. Well, that's true. They don't. But the calm earthquake weather makes earthquakes perceptible. You could feel them much more easily on a warm, still day than you did on a normal windy day over in Hollister. So earthquake weather, when I went out the door on October 17th, 1989, my lovely wife heard me say, it was a warm, still day, and I said, later on was reminded that I said it, earthquake weather. So when you have the constant reminder, and the good thing about the Hollister earthquakes is that they're letting off the pressure, and so they don't. Having a lot of small earthquakes is a good thing, and you get to, for example, in the kitchen cabinets in our kitchen in Hollister, there were they came with the upper shelves, particularly of the good china, where you keep the good stuff, had across them piano wire to hold the dishes in. The doors of the cabinets had clasps on them. They didn't not magnets. They were doors that actually closed, and you had to actually push a button to get the door to open. That was because you didn't want the doors to fly open and the dishes to fall out. Because they would if they, it was just, in the liquor stores and in the grocery stores, the bottles in the liquor stores had, and I believe still do, piano wire across. So if you reached in to get, say, a bottle of wine, you had to lift up and over in order to get the bottle out, because it was a piece of wire that was strung across there holding it in. And there were times I used to think that people were, if a person from Hollister went to a liquor store, say in San Luis Obispo, you could tell them you knew them because they reached in, particularly if they had been drinking a little bit, and would reach in and lift up and over even though there was no wire. That was the tell. The tell of
the muscle memory of earthquake country.
So when you come from that kind of a background, you get cocky. You get cocky. That's the only way I can explain it. So that my personal experience 36 years ago today was I got unhorsed. I got thrown. I was an earthquake cowboy, and I got seriously thrown. And a lifetime of ones and twos does not get you ready for a 6 or a 7 or whatever they finally decided that it was. And as you were saying, the muscle memory, the kinds of ways that you react don't fit the circumstance. This was a big deal.
Yes.
And it was particularly a big deal because the San Andreas doesn't let off steam very often, locks up, and this was big deal. Okay, so we're in the 400 building at Cabrillo College, 2-story building, seismically designed, obviously, modern building built in the early 60s. And we're in a meeting, and the meeting has just ended. It ended at 5:00, and I was chairing the meeting. It was a faculty meeting of some kind. I think it was a sabbatical leave or some committee that I chaired, and I was up at the front of the room, and people were standing and getting ready, gathering up their belongings and getting ready to leave. And at 5:04, I heard it. The sound, it's like a symphony. It's the prelude, and the prelude of an earthquake for me has always been the clinking of metal, and like in Hollister, it was the clinking of the glasses, the plates, and in this case, it was the metal fixtures, things that were loose that were clinking together. But it's a very high-pitched and very short, sharp, shaking sound. It's very, very distinctive. Mm-hmm. And I knew immediately, what was going on. And as it continued, people started to scream. There are obviously people from some other state or some other...
Not Hollister.
Not Hollister. People started to scream, faculty members, and I said, okay. And I stood up, and I said, it's just an earthquake. And it was a classroom that had tables, so I said, just get down under the tables. It's going to be over immediately. Don't worry about it. I was trying to reassure them, and using my bravado from Hollister, it's just an earthquake. Nothing to worry about. And as I got down, and I did get down, this is one of the first times I'd ever gotten down under anything for an earthquake, because we'd never,
they weren't that big before.
That big. And so I'm on my hands and knees under the table, and there was a door adjacent that was open. It had been a warm day. And there's no air conditioning in the buildings at Cabrillo. So, the classroom door was open, and I could see out into the parking lot that was adjacent to the building, and I could see I saw for the first time in my life what scientists call the P wave, which is the wave that goes through the ground from the epicenter to go over and knock down buildings somewhere. And I saw that it actually undulated. A wave went through. It didn't break the surface. It's almost like magic, where it went through you could see the wave, and then everything settled down. The few cars that were there were. This is what,
they were back on the ground.
Back on the ground. They didn't come off the ground, but I saw that and I thought, And I'm trying to be the adult in the room, right? I'm trying to assure people, look, I'm from Hollister. You got nothing to worry about. And I started a conversation with the earthquake, which I have continued to this day. The conversation, and I called it Bucko. I gave him a name, sexist pig that I am. And I said, okay, Bucko, you've made your point. It's time. It seemed like, they say 15 seconds. Now it's about 5 years.
Yes.
I'm on my hands and knees.
Indeed.
People have calmed down. They're still not screaming too much. But I'm saying, okay, knock it off. And that's exactly what I said. Okay, Bucko, knock it off. You've made your point. You can, and it seemed, and then eventually it stopped. And there's that stillness that comes after something like that, but then almost automatically, the fire alarms on campus started to go off. The electricity was gone, but the fire alarms, and then in the distance, I could hear sirens starting, and I thought, to myself, I'm having this conversation with myself in the earthquake, and I'm saying, well, okay, so I stood up and did what every Hollisterite does. I stood up and said, okay, 5.0 Gilroy. I did the magnitude and thing, and I pointed. Yes. I pointed up that way, which I got that part right.
Yeah.
And they all stood up and brushed each other off, and and then everybody's starting to think about how do I get a hold of, and there's no phones, and it becomes a kind of a mess. But and it was daylight still, which was a good thing.
Yeah.
And I walked around the corner, and in that particular building where we were, my faculty office was immediately around the corner from the classroom. And I opened my office door, and it was 5.5, maybe even 6 feet deep in books. The bookshelves that I had put up all the way to the ceiling.
Yeah.
The desk was covered with I probably
would have been smashed.
I would have been hurt for sure. So I thought, maybe not 5.0. I'm thinking to myself now. And so I get around the corner, and I have a class that's going to start at 6. A local history class that I did in the evenings at 6 o'clock. And and there were no lights. By that time, it was starting to get dark. And I thought, I'm going to have to. So I stood in the parking lot waiting. The first thing I went to my car and turned on the car radio. Dead air. There was no station that I could immediately find. It was, and I thought, everything was beginning to suggest maybe
this is a big one.
Was a little low. I don't know. And so I stood in the parking lot, and eventually, I think the ball game station came on, but then they were going crazy by then up there at Candlestick. So I waited for the cars to come because I knew that my dedicated students, most of whom were adults, not 18-year-olds, they drove up, and they would pull in and say, are we going to have class? Are we going to have class? Are we going to have class tonight? And I would have to say, no, you see, there's no power. I suggest that you go home. maybe, because they were probably on their way to class, coming out of Santa Cruz or wherever. And one of the women, she drove up and said, I thought I had a flat tire, and I drove into the gas station. There was a gas station down the street, and that a kindly young man said, "No, your tires are all right, ma'am.
It's just an earthquake."
It's just an earthquake. so that was the point where, now fortunately, for me, my wife Annie was in a building next door, taking a singing class, which had started with Michelle Rivard, wonderful singing instructor there at the college. And so she had come up out of the classroom and was in the parking lot, same parking lot where I had parked, and we both had come separately. So she was able to we made contact. Everybody's, we're okay.
Yeah.
And then she went off and went home, and I, just about at that time, or maybe a little before, I went into shock.
Yeah.
I have no memory of anything after driving out of the parking lot.
Yeah.
And driving home. I don't know how I got there. I didn't see any of what people told me they could see between our house and the Santa Cruz Mountains. So, speaking of whom,
we've just been joined here in the studio by Annie Lydon.
Who is Michael, nice to see you, sir.
And also Michael Olson. Thank you.
So we're
welcome.
We're on the floodplain as we speak. Of course, that's just something to note.
Here today at 325 Soquel Avenue in Satellite Workspace.
Yeah, and don't be coming down here and annoying us, okay? We got things to do. So, and as my wife will probably attest, even to this day, I was absolutely worthless. We were very fortunate. I think the classroom was is about 6 miles from the epicenter. Our house was 2 miles from the epicenter. We're on the ridge of the Aptos Canyon, which is where the epicenter ultimately was determined to be, further up. So we were really close physically, but the house shook heavily.
Yeah.
A piano was thrown across the room and doors were thrown open, and maybe she can tell you exactly what it looked like, because I can remember the smell.
Oh, yes.
Mustard and ketchup. Because the refrigerator door had flown open, and the things that were in the door had flown out on the ground. So there was mustard and ketchup all over everywhere. But fortunately, no major structural damage. And our lovely German Shepherd dog named China, and it was not a name I gave her. She came to us with that name.
Fortuitously.
Yeah, that's one of the reasons we adopted her. She was downstairs and alone, and she never recovered. And in a weird, perverse way, ultimately, I didn't want to. There is a taste and a smell of fear, which I think can be useful. I think there's times when you need to, if you can bring it back, not so it's debilitating and you're lying on the ground, unable to move, but that there was something that sharpened senses. And And so I started the verbal relationship that I started with the Epicenter. Now, let me just say this: the scientists didn't get it right, and for a long time, the Epicenter they weren't sure where it was, and they weren't sure where the fault was. It was an unidentified fault. They actually they invented a fault for a while called the Zayante fault, but then that proved ultimately that the USGS finally settled that it was a spur off of the San Andreas, and it was way deep in the earth, way down there, and so when the press started to come, and it was literally in the middle of nowhere. It was way up the Aptos Canyon, at a place you had to hike to, maybe 5 miles from the fire road up the Aptos Creek Trail.
In the forest of Nisene Marks State Park.
Nisene Marks State Park.
Yeah.
A place that I knew really well. I had been on the Park Advisory Committee for several decades, and I had a key to the gate, which is usual measure of your, if you've got any juice. I notice you have a key to this building. That's worth something. And so, as the very first thing the state parks had to deal with, an article came out. Nobody knew where the epicenter was to begin with, and so the closest drivable road seemed to be the summit road. And so all the reporters and the shade tree geologists drove along the summit road, and there was some really dramatic crevices in the road up there, and some of the buildings, the transmitter buildings up there, had been really hit hard. So there was some thought that maybe it was up there somewhere. Thus, maybe the name Loma Prieta. Loma Prieta is a mountain, but it's in Santa Clara County. It's actually not even in the county, and it's on the north side of the Santa Cruz Mountains, over in Santa Clara County side. So a lot of the attention is up there. I keep pointing. There's nobody here to see me do this, but, up there at the summit. And State Parks is trying to wrestle with what to do about Nisene Marks. They closed it initially, but then the Mercury and the Chronicle both printed articles about the epicenter might be in Nisene Marks, and of course the epicenter isn't usually where the damage is and where people actually experience it. The P wave, the things radiate out 360 degrees, and the damage is rarely where the epicenter is. That seems to be a rule. And usually it's a city. It's like San Francisco. San Francisco sets itself on fire and falls down, and then usually becomes the name of the earthquake, the San Francisco earthquake 1906. Well, the epicenter of that earthquake, they're still working on it. I'm not sure.
Really?
But somewhere up north, Marin County, somewhere up that way. And so in this case, now the people think it's in Nisene Marks. But no one's really sure where yet in Nisene Marks. They're going to want to see something. So I'm on the advisory committee, and we finally started to meet. This is a couple of weeks. I start to recover a little bit, and we finally decide it might be up the Aptos Creek Trail, and somebody printed up a cardboard sign, put a couple of coordinates on it just to make it look official, and put it on the trail just where the trails start to get really gnarly and you couldn't go much farther.
Yeah.
But to keep people from hurting themselves.
Yeah.
And so, because they wanted to see it.
Yeah.
The traffic came into the park, and actually cars were parked up alongside entrance road, the fire road, all the way back to Aptos.
Wow.
There was no place to park. There were hundreds and hundreds of people. Where's the epicenter?
I'm going to ask you to pull the microphone a little bit closer to you there.
Okay.
Because we want to make sure. Just
don't-
pull it to you.
Pull it to you.
Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah.
Oh, that's
there
how
we
it
go.
works, huh? Modern stuff. So
Thank
they would come in, and this was in droves, but rarely dressed. They had to hike on a trail, cocktail dresses, high heel shoes.
I remember seeing that.
They just drove down and said, "I want to see the guy that bit me. I want to see what did this."
Bucko.
Bucko. They didn't know his name was Bucko. And so they would hike in. And one of the unintended consequences was that the foot traffic, really improved the trails. That's one of the jobs that the advisory committee had was, to build trails. They widened the trail way out. At one of the meetings, as that started to develop, we thought, they don't know where the epicenter is. Why don't we just move the sign from place to place in the park and get all the trails improved in the process, right? Well, that seemed a little too cynical for state parks. They weren't that cynical.
They didn't know a good deal when they saw
No,
it.
they didn't. And so then eventually we decided, and I decided to go in and to actually see if we could find maybe some evidence of the epicenter, whatever it was there. Now, let me just say, everything loose in the forest had fallen to the ground.
Yeah.
So every dead limb, everything, dead trees fell over.
Tops of redwood trees.
Well, man, that comes later. That's a later discovery.
Okay.
In the beginning, boulders came down. I tried to find out who the hikers were in the park at that time, but it was late. See, it's 5:04. You can't be far in the park at 5:04. You shouldn't be, because you're going to have to come out in the dark. And so there weren't a lot of people in the park. There were a few, and they heard boulders coming off the ridge tops.
Wow.
And we later saw places where the boulders had come down and sheared off redwood trees and continued on. I mean, it was a very, very dynamic location. So that when we started to hike in to get beyond where the trail sign was, where the epicenter was, and then the trail closed, was put up there to stop people. We went beyond that, and we had with us Annie. Annie was part of the group, and also Gerald Weber, Jerry Weber.
Oh, the park ranger at the time.
No, that's Jerry Wagoner.
Oh, that's Jerry Wagoner. Yeah,
Right. Jerry Weber was a geologist, and an old buddy, and a geology graduate from UCSC and taught at UCSC, and he was with us, and he, because of just the debris, we weren't even anywhere near the epicenter yet. The debris was just, all the canyons were filled with dead limbs. The last time that had happened was a snowstorm in 76, I think 1976, which had cleaned out all the trees. The snowstorm just knocked everything out. So the earthquake, took care of all the dead limbs and all the branches, and and he kept muttering to himself, "Oh my God!" He even hard-bitten geologist, Jerry Weber, even before we got anywhere near where the epicenter was really supposed to be, he was impressed. So we worked our way along the trail. Trail had slid away, and the Aptos Canyon narrows as it goes up, as Aptos Creek comes out of the Santa Cruz Mountains. It carved a very narrow canyon, which has the place name Hell's Gate. And it was called that by the railroad company when the railroad company pushed a railroad up there back in the 1880s. So this is very steep country, and some of it, and another place name, way up very close to where I think I could stand and actually talk to Bucko, was a place called Big Slide. And Big Slide was a place where the canyon walls had come very close together. And then in 1906, the earthquake in April 1906, the canyon walls had collapsed, creating bare slides on both sides, damming up the creek at the bottom, which happened a couple of other places in what is another park. So the 1906 earthquake, which Marin County, okay,
Right.
had affected the place already. No relationship to, Bucko, who I'm trying to come to terms with. So we got up there and pretty well established somewhere in this kind of area, because it was so deep that it wasn't, it didn't manifest itself. But at the top of the slides, there were flats, and the slides of the earthquake in 1989 had begun similar landslides that had occurred in 1906, and they were starting. It's like stretch marks. It's like the earth stretch marks, because the earth heaved and moved laterally both, and it stretched the earth and created. It's kind of like those places. I think you went up there with me once. And,
Yes.
And I took you up, and
Yes.
I took people up to because people needed to see something.
Yeah.
They needed to have some. I was already in conversations with this animal that I was trying to use to keep, because what I wanted personally was to be reminded. I didn't want to forget.
Yeah.
The human impulse is to forget and have things go back to normal. I didn't want that. I didn't want that, because I wanted the edge that comes with that, which also makes it easier to think about events like floods and fires, and earthquakes, and pandemics, and tsunamis, and all those things, which are a regular part of this place. I mean, in fact, I've studied this so long that I finally decided that I don't use the word disaster anymore. I use the word event. Disaster has a negative feel to it. It feels like it's something that's negative. No, this is part of the natural occurrence. And what you should do is look at it neutrally, and then say, okay, what do we do? What do we do about this? What do we do? To get ready, perhaps it might occur, so to minimize the harm to ourselves, but also, what do we do to mitigate the mistakes we've made in building things where we've built them? When the recent floods, the January floods, the last couple of January floods, when the waves come up and the water comes up and eats a restaurant that's on the beach, and then we say, well, how soon are we going to get things back to normal? No, normal is when the event's happening. That's normal, right? Abnormal is when you build something on the beach, and then you want to put it back. And there's that whole thing about repeating over and over and not being very bright. But the whole system that we're in is dependent, and is dependent on the momentum of property ownership and the common everyday things that we've done. I think an event like Bucko gave us an opportunity to maybe undo some of the not so bright things that we did. I don't know how often you drive down Highway 1, driving west. It says north, but it ain't going north. All right, you're going west. When the sun's in your eyes, and you have to put the visor down. What's the sun doing up here in the north? No, you're going. It's not north. So there's a thing called the fish hook. Now I don't know if you've ever considered. Who the hell did that? I mean, how did that happen?
Yeah.
We have more arrows of the crooked arrows. They make special printings of crooked arrows and not through road signs for this county because it's all dead end roads. All of it. So when you look at that, well, that's an extreme example. Obviously, we're not going to do anything about it. My dream was to see if I could get Caltrans to agree to this. I don't know how we'd physically do it. I want to put grandstands inside the fish hook. They not open on weekdays because that's locals. Locals understand what it means when it says it's coming all the way around, kids. It's a diminishing radius, turn.
Slow down.
There. But actually we could make some money.
To fix the roads.
Make some money.
Make more signs.
And maybe make some more signs. Because the guy that has to, or woman, that has to paint the tire marks off that retaining wall that they put up.
They should leave them, and that should be a warning.
Leave them and yeah. Anyway, in fact, one of my favorite graffitis, and I actually think I got out and got a photograph of it before they painted it over, was up at the summit when you're going on 17 down the other side, just when it starts, just when the down starts. There's another really nice, right hand curve, and somebody had spray painted Valley Surprise, which I thought was brilliant, absolutely brilliant. So I have a photograph of it somewhere. So I think, and I'm going uphill in this because it's a little late in my career, but to begin to change the way of thinking about pandemics and all the things that they just come and they're there and they come to, as an example, I was invited. There was a thing called Vision Santa Cruz that came after this, where after
the 1989 earthquake, I remember that.
Absolutely, and the city of Santa Cruz set it up. I believe Mr. Charles Canfield, I believe, was the chair. That's who I remember. Mm-hmm. And they and for some strange reason they invited me to make a presentation, but you only got 5 minutes, or something, about what I thought and what my historical perspective of this event for downtown Santa Cruz.
Of disasters or earthquakes or in general?
Right. Well, this was just specific to downtown Santa Cruz. Uh-huh. Well, I spent the first, 3.5, 4 minutes describing all the things that had happened in downtown Santa Cruz. I mean, it was a litany of fires and floods and stuff. And then I said, I think this is a wonderful opportunity.
Yeah.
Move the town. Boy, it got really quiet. And then I distinctly remember Mr. Canfield looking at his watch and saying, "Next." My time was up. But the idea of undoing the original's decisions that got the town on a floodplain in the first, and I even said it even before I was dragged off the podium, I said, but it's not the earthquakes you got to worry about. It's the river you've got to worry about.
Yeah.
The river continually has been an issue for the town from the very beginning. You've got to keep your eye on the river. Keep your eye on the river. And then they, dragged me screaming and kicking and foaming at the mouth off the off the stage. And I knew that was not a reasonable thing to say, but I wanted them to get the idea that there's an initial. You're going to have to pay more attention.
Yeah.
You're not paying attention. It's like a teacher, constantly saying. Teachers say, you're not paying attention. Pay attention, for God's sakes. And that includes those of you that are listening to this. Pay more attention. It's a good idea. No better day to start.
We've got 3 minutes left in our first hour. For those of you who have just tuned in, we are honored to have here as our guest today Sandy Lydon. His wife, Annie Lydon, is here in the studio with Michael Olson. We're talking about the earthquake that happened here 36 years ago today. We're going to continue in the second hour, so please stay tuned. And Sandy, what are we going to talk about in the second hour? Well,
what we're going to talk about, I think, is the next 36 years.
Yeah.
And it's all very personal. And I'm sorry if you can't, if you want some sort of holistic scientific notion, you're not going to get it here from me today. It was personal. I took it personally. I'm a Hollister guy. I knew earthquakes, I thought, it's become part of my effort to try to come to terms with what the hell really happened and to not forget.
Yeah.
Because the natural impulse, I think we're built this way. Otherwise, look, if you remembered everything negative that ever happened, you wouldn't get out of bed in the morning. You wouldn't be able to do anything. There's a natural numbing up. This long-term and short-term disaster memory thing that just, it recedes. It has to. You have to. But maybe it's not us that needs to remember. Maybe it's the people who help make the decisions as to where to put things, where to build things, how to do things. Maybe it's the people that we elect to help lead us. We have the luxury that we can forget. Maybe we shouldn't. And I'm not encouraging people to do that. But for all the people who weren't here then,
yeah,
right?
Yes.
There's no way.
And there are many. Can people call in the second hour and talk with you and tell some of their stories?
Oh, sure.
All right.
Sure. And if they want me to change their grade, just let me know who you are. And I'm still licensed. I can go back and change your grade. And either way, actually.
So stay tuned with us for the second hour here with Sandy Lydon. Call in 831-265-5050 to join us here on Community Matters on the 36th anniversary of the Loma Prieta earthquake. So I think we are off the air.
Off the air?
For a moment.
What happens then? What are they hearing?
There's a 6-minute recorded news break.
Yes, the news is on right now.
And then we come back on.
Oh, the news. Did anything happen today?
Did anything not happen today?
Thank you.
So what do you think of the ghost city they're building in downtown Santa Cruz?
I think that's tomorrow.
Oh, is it tomorrow?
What's going on over
Yeah.
It's tomorrow.
Do you want to be able
I
to
grew up
hear
in a
if
town.
people call in? You can just put
There
on
were
the
no
earphones.
buildings higher than 3 stories.
There are two
None.
sets here.
My family
He's
home was
using
2.5
those. He
stories
couldn't get
high.
these to work.
Oh.
But,
They knew better.
We may need to try
Because
a
when we
different
built
pair.
things
Yeah.
5 stories, there were no brick
Let me plug it
chimneys.
into a different
All the brick chimneys that
Right.
obviously people built just stupidly. There were
Punching
no
this
old
line here.
adobes.
Yeah.
None of that. I mean, it was, you know,
You
like that.
see better.
Where was that?
Was that?
Was that Hollister?
Yeah.
Let me
yeah,
tap.
I grew up in Hollister.
Maybe a little.
And you know, it's
Thank you.
Yeah. Can you hear me?
No.
I think those earphones are defective. What do you think, Michael?
Here's how you turn it up and down right here.
Yeah, I thought I had turned it up.
Number, what is it?
I've turned up all three. They're all
Okay,
all
should be good.
all are on, but she's not hearing anything. Michael, could you get her another set of earphones,
Okay.
please?
Yeah.
Because I'd like, if people call in, I want you to be able to hear. And set for yourself, Michael, too, if you want. Thank you.
Can I have the end of that?
Oh,
Yep. Let's see. Nope. That won't work. Okay, let me see if I can fix this for her.
maybe I didn't set it up quite right. I've got them all turned on.
Okay.
Test, test, test.
So we're off the air now. I probably won't hear anything.
Oh,
Test, test, test,
I hear you.
Nothing there. So let's see if we can track down the issue here. There's always a technical issue. Always.
I'm so glad you're here.
Okay, so you have us turned up all the way.
Yeah.
And let's see, what number are we plugged into there?
That's number 2.
Okay. Test, test, test. Test, test, test. Number 3. Test, test. Barely.
I've got you. So whatever.
Oh. Test, 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 test.
No, there's nothing
No.
coming through these.
Okay.
It's okay. It's all right.
Maybe another set of headphones.
That's what I was looking for. That's what I was looking for.
Michael,
Yes.
we have a question for you. You can answer really fast.
Yep.
The
This is water for you if you'd like.
Oh, okay.
Vern Berlin, I got it.
Yeah, Vernon Berlin.
I got it.
Oh,
Vern Berlin.
Yes.
Vern Berlin. We were talking old KSCO radio,
Yeah.
and
That's quite a story about the earthquake on KSCO too. For what happened there during the earthquake.
yeah, and I interviewed the engineer from Channel 13 later, who was
Test.
their facility was up at the summit,
Yeah.
and then also the engineer for
Color.
the TV station that
KSCW.
I had worked on.
Test,
It was
test,
up on
test.
Fremont
Do you hear
I
me?
hear you.
Okay, good.
And,
Thank you,
but
Michael.
the guy on Channel 13 had the hell of a story. It was that little cinder block, one of those cinder blocks with the antenna sticking out, and it actually threw him. He was just leaving. Everybody was either getting off work or
Yeah,
he
right.
was just about ready to get off work, and
Happened to me.
threw him picked him up off the floor and threw him back and forth.
I was standing next to my wife's full-size Mercedes, 300 SD. My daughter had just ran out of the house, jumped into my arms, and when that earthquake hit, the Mercedes went airborne.
Yeah.
It was like that.
So here's the question. The question is, do we, what, for the people who weren't here, people who moved in or weren't born, what, do we even bother anymore? You know, it's almost like, because all they do is roll their eyes.
I think you, yes, but I think you have to warn people that the Santa Cruz County is but a narrow spit of land sandwiched between the San Andreas Fault and great white sharks. And things happen here.
And we're back on the
Well, they happen here because the topography is such as it is.
All right, we're back on the air. That was a quick time.
May I do a quick introduction?
Yes,
Okay.
please.
We're on the air. So, ladies and gentlemen, you've been listening to the most incredible story of the San Andreas earthquake. Yeah, not the San Andreas, but the Loma Prieta earthquake, which was on the San Andreas Fault. And told by Sandy Lydon, Santa Cruz County's preeminent storyteller. But we wonder if it was true. But we have an eyewitness, and it's Annie. Annie, did it really happen this way?
She's running from the microphone.
She's shaking her head.
No, she's not. We'll get her.
Okay.
Yeah, because I already set them up. If
right.
they're still listening, I made the point that you happen to be on campus.
That's right.
Taking a class right next door.
She's nodding assent.
In the forum building, and what was happening? What did you do? What?
She's shaking her head. No.
Oh God. but and I think Michael's right. I think we need. I think as long as we can tell them, we need to tell them, but we can't expect them. That is the people that weren't here. We can't expect them to necessarily do anything.
Because they will have not experienced what we experienced.
Well, yeah, and it's really hard. It's a little story. I'm no longer driving. I'm riding shotgun now, again, as I was when I was a teenager. Oh, I couldn't wait to get in the driver's seat. And now I'm back out of the driver's seat. And the very mute at the moment woman who I'm married to is driving. And we were down at Trader Joe's, in the parking lot at Trader Joe's. And sometimes I defer. I don't need to go in to the store to do.
Yeah.
So I'll sit in the and I have the window rolled down. And a gentleman walked up. I'd say he was in his 50s. And he didn't even say hello. He stood next to me and reached in his pocket and pulled out a flashlight and said, "You told us never to go out anywhere, anytime in this county without a flashlight." That was 30 some odd years ago that I told him. He still had the flashlight. And I thought, there's one. I got one. I won. You don't want to be greedy. You can't get them all. If I can just get one or two. It was funny, but he actually remembered one of the presentations that I gave after the earthquake. And then we did commemorations, anniversary commemorations. First year, 5 years, 10 years, 15. And I, on each of those moments, still working with the park, we'd get permission. We'd drive in so that we'd do something maybe at White's Lagoon, which then makes you're maybe a mile and a half or two from the place the top of Big Slide. The top of Big Slide is really about the best, I think, place. And that's where I used to go. And I would go take groups, and then often would go by myself. This was one of my sort of routines in October, somewhere around the earthquake. And I know you're not supposed to walk alone. You don't walk, always walk with somebody, yada, yada, yada. But I always found it easier for me to walk alone because I was having a conversation with the Epicenter and myself, and and also I could sit down whenever I felt like.
Yeah.
I didn't have to, and I didn't have to worry about whether the other person was having a good time or not. I could indulge myself, and so that's one of the things I really miss is that ability to just take a long walk, and so when I would go by myself, there's an edge of the slide where I could actually sit, and there was a tan bark oak that was right there on my left, and I would drape my legs over the edge of the slide, and I could look down, and you could still see evidence of the slides slides were always going.
Yeah.
The slide, when it was quiet and the wind wasn't blowing, and
Earthquake weather.
yeah, right, earthquake weather, and I could hear the pebbles all around, always, constantly, falling off of these scarps and falling down into the creek. I realized that this county, this place is constantly on the move, and gravity is winning. Gravity wins. That's the bumper sticker. You get the bumper sticker and put it on there. Valley Surprise is a good one, but gravity wins. And just as a confirmation of that, just in case you missed it going by, FEMA. I guess I should explain what FEMA was. FEMA was the Federal Emergency Management Agency, a government agency. FEMA did studies besides write checks. They did more than write checks. And they did a study of the entire United States and every county in the United States of their risk assessment for landslides, and that particular phenomenon. In this California counties, the 52 or however many we have, Santa Cruz County ranks number 1.
Wow.
Number 1. The most landslide-prone location in California. This little tiny, itsy-bitsy, little gnarly little place.
Second smallest in the state.
Second smallest, yeah. So
After San Francisco.
Well, this is a percentage issue. Obviously, it's by percentage of land area. But this is the most most landslide-prone county in the state. We're not behaving like that. Mm-hmm. We don't act like we know that. We don't act like, and all we do is hope that that FEMA also sends the check
Yes.
for the last one. I have an image. I've made this up. This is not true. This is invented. Disclaimer. But somewhere in the FEMA headquarters which I don't know where they are anymore, but the headquarters in Washington, there's a room. And there's a room where they double check the checks before they put them in the envelope and mail them, okay? And the checks that are going out for the damage, whatever has been done. And on the wall, there's a huge map. And this is a very primitive place here. This is not electronics. They take a push pin and they put a push pin in the county where they're sending the checks. They had to enlarge the Central Coast part of the map because Santa Cruz County, there were too many pins. They couldn't get the pins into the thing. And then there was somebody in that same room who always double-checked and said, wait, double-check. We're sending another one to Santa Cruz County? Double-check that, and that's why they're always late. The checks are always late because they're double checking in Washington, saying, "No, that can't be."
And looking for room for new push pins.
Making room for new push pins, and you know, and so now all of that's over, and I'm gonna do something I don't normally do. I don't do future. I do past. I'm riding the donkey backwards. So I'm sitting on the donkey looking that way.
As all good historians are.
That's what we're supposed to do. We don't do future. That's just, so I'm often asked my opinion about things. What do you think about, you know, what they're doing or what they're planning to do? I do not express an opinion. And I've been asked dozens of times about this railroad project that seems to be going on around
that'll
here.
light up the phone lines.
Right. And I've been asked by all sides my opinion because I have some knowledge of railroad history. No, and I will only suggest that whatever signage you put on the stretch from Santa Cruz to Watsonville, whether it's a trail or whatever it ends up being, the word Chinese has to be in that signage. That the people who built that risked life and limb and sometimes died, have to be honored in that part. But generally, I don't do future. So the challenge that we were alluding to is the challenge of dealing with what do you do with people who don't know. There is a monument. Ross Gibson designed a monument that's right next to where the Cooper House used to be.
Oh, yes.
It's hidden by some trees and a couple of pop-up vendor tents, so it's very, very difficult to find. But we've tried almost overtly to not remember, because the history can get in the way of what some people see as progress, or as necessity, and he's still not aligned directly there. Yeah. So okay. So let me just get to the part about the earthquake that just scared the crap out of me. I was up there with Annie and a group, and we were up on the top of the Big Slide area, and I was looking for crevices and stuff and evidence and things.
Was this right after it had happened?
This was no. This is maybe weeks now. I wasn't capable of, I was still
recovering. We all were, and we all still are.
I still am.
Yeah, me too.
And I noticed that there were trees on the ground that looked like junipers. I wrote the Coast Redwood book. I know trees, all right, and and they looked like junipers. And I knew there were no junipers in the park. They just weren't. And they were lying on the ground, maybe 5 or 6 feet long, lying on the ground as if they had been there but then flipped over. And that didn't make any sense. And it took me a little while to figure out that they were actually the tops of second growth redwoods that had snapped off in that motion.
Wow.
Green, no, we saw what we call peckerwood. Peckerwood is the snags of old growth redwoods that die back and then have a lot of woodpecker, holes in them. So that a lot of times old growth tops would snap off in an earthquake. But there on the ground were 5, and they were ragged on the bottom. They were not cut off. They were snapped off. So Tony Hill and Tony was my television producer at the time, and we miss you, Tony. Oh, Lord, do we miss you. Anyway, Tony, and we made arrangements, and we rented an airplane out of San Jose.
Wow.
And we flew the park. There were no drones at that time, and it would have made it a lot easier. And you could see that on ridge tops, where the ridge tops came to a peak, but then you'd have a linear row of redwoods that were on those ridge tops where the tops had snapped off. You could actually pull down. We got the plane to fly a little lower than he wanted to, and we got some photographs and some video of the treetops, and I then began to look in the science to see if anybody had ever done anything on this. Couldn't find. I tried to convince my seismology buddies that there's because that meant that the lateral motion, the horizontal motion of that ridgetop had to be such that it would whip those trees and snap off their tops.
Yeah.
That, buildings fall down, chimneys fall down, baseball diamonds get all crazy, and cities set themselves on fire. But I never imagined the kind of motion, and it's hard to imagine. It's hard to fathom the kind of motion that would have required for those trees to do that. And obviously now, 36 years later, they're all recovered, and they sent the branches that were just below there turned and headed for the sun, and are all now growing. But so I would go up every year, and I had a couple of favorites that were, over the years, were getting gray, and as we all were, excuse me, and I would go up and talk to them and talk to the Epicenter. I'd sit there and say what I could think to say to the Epicenter, and also just sort of wonder aloud about what it all meant, and also what a rare thing it was to have the Epicenter so close.
Yeah.
That I literally, from my house, I never would, but from my house I could walk to it, and it's still there. It's still there, and it's still, I think, the earthquake. We had some breakage in the house, and there's a couple of broken tiles, and there's a broken corner tile at the kitchen sink, right where I make my morning coffee. That tile will forever be broken. I look at it every day
To help you remember that event.
to help me just remember. Mike Marini, Father Mike Marini, who was a student of mine long after he was of student age, but he was an old dude, but Santa Cruz dude and a wonderful man. He was, I think, in charge of Holy Cross when the earthquake came and the steeple flipped off. I call it the witch's hat, which is not really very parochially.
That's all right.
And Sister Benita Francis is going to give me hell for that. She rides on one shoulder. And anyway, and I was up there. He was getting ready to do I think the next day, the mass to open up to rededicate the church.
After it was repaired.
After it was repaired. And I said, did you fix everything? Did you leave? You have to leave something. Something's got to be cracked somewhere. And he said, well, and he hadn't done it consciously. And I said, well, maybe in a closet somewhere. There's something broken. Because when we fix everything, St. Andrew St. Andrew's not happy. Let me just say. St. Andrew was crucified upside down, for a historical moment, which would make everybody, I think, terminally upset.
Yes.
And he's waiting, just waiting.
So what did they leave unfixed in the church? You were telling us that Father Marini had left
Father
something.
Marini. And then he set a high mass, a big deal high mass. Lots of people up on the altar, wandering around and doing things, ceremonially and officially. And I'm a fallen away, so I had too much baggage for me. So I love the man dearly, but I just couldn't take it.
Yeah.
So, but
for those of you, just a moment, for those of you who've just tuned in, we have the honor here of Sandy Lydon and his wife Annie here in the studio, Michael Olson here in the studio with us. We're talking about what happened 36 years ago today at 5:04 p.m. when the earth shook violently. It shook violently. And what was it like for you if you were here? Or maybe in another earthquake. California has a few. So call in, and here's the number, 831-265-5050, and join the conversation. We'd like to hear what you experienced that day and how it affected you. Maybe you're still thinking about that day as well. Maybe you were in Candlestick Park. Maybe you were on the freeway. Maybe, like me, you were within less than a half a mile from the epicenter, standing outside with my neighbors. We were thrown to the ground with a shaking, and we watched those trees whip back and forth. And a redwood tree next to our home did lose its top. We didn't know that until about 12 years later. There was a violent windstorm, and that new top broke off and came through our roof. And that's when we learned that our trees had lost their tops. It was an amazing moment, but let me tell you, as you have said, Sandy, good things come out of everything. And these events are opportunities for us to pick up, look around us, and move on, and keep a piece of what happened with us. What happened in our community was that people got together. We didn't have power. And none of us wanted to go in our houses. They were a mess. They smelled of soy sauce, ketchup, mustard. But we all had food we were worried about losing. We all got together in various people's driveways with camp stoves, made supper, shared stories, comforted each other for 3 days until the power came back on in 2 phases of our community. We were getting news about how horrible it was with the bridges over in the Bay Area, and we felt really lucky to be there in the woods with each other, sharing meals and comforting each other. So when 2 phases of the power in our neighborhood came on, the crowd thinned because they all wanted to go see the images on their televisions. Our home was one that didn't get power. And so the few of us that didn't have power continued to meet. And we decided out of that we should keep doing this. And every year since then, our community has had a community potluck and not waited for an event to get us together. And it is a wonderful thing to keep together with the people and remind ourselves and each other of how much we do depend on each other. So if you have any thoughts, memories, anything in your memory banks or stories, maybe, this happened 36 years ago. Maybe your parents told you about what it was like. Please call in to 831-265-5050.
That's wonderful. And one of the things you alluded to the various other locations. If you Google the earthquake these days, you'll get USGS. You'll get some of their web pages and stuff. But very often you'll find a Wikipedia or something that will say, it'll say, AKA the World Series earthquake, AKA the Marina District earthquake. So that other places have stolen the damn thing from us. I mean, come on.
Made it relevant for what they experienced.
Well, it was the place where the videos were so striking.
Yeah.
There's
The double-decker bridges that sandwiched.
Yesterday, we were on Highway 1. I'm in my shotgun seat, pointing out things that I never noticed before because I've been driving. And we were at under an overpass, and I'm thinking, okay, and the traffic's kind of slow, and I'm thinking, let's just get moved. Come on, we're right under. This is not a good place to be.
Yes.
This is not a good place to be.
You don't want to be under concrete.
The memory of and what happened to those, when they all fell down. No, it's not a good place. It may be shady and cool under there, but no, you want to move along. You never know.
That was a common thing to see on Highway 1, right? For quite a while after the earthquake, people would not stop and be parked under one of the concrete overpasses.
And it's still a good idea. Thank you very much. I believe.
Michael, what do you remember?
Quite a bit, actually. 5 o'clock, just got home from work. My toddler daughter came running out of the front door, jumped up into my arms, and we lived in a little wooden house at the end of a long blacktop driveway on the Phil in Soquel Valley there, about a mile up out of the village. And what I remember distinctly, having this little girl in my arms, was the sound of it coming. Standing there on that driveway, I could hear it coming, but you couldn't tell from which direction because it was coming from the center of the earth straight at you.
Did you know what it was? Did you recognize the sound?
I knew something was coming because it sounded like a railroad train coming right to you, but you couldn't tell it was from the inside of your head, so you didn't know where. But at any rate, when it hit the surface, we were standing next to my wife's full-size car, and the thing went completely airborne, completely off the ground. Boom! And then I looked down the driveway, and the driveway started undulating in waves as tall as myself. And the trees, these giant eucalyptus trees, were bending down and snapping back and bending down the other way and snapping back. And it just went on and on and on, and our little house there was just rumbling, and I kept yelling at my wife, "Get out of there, get out of there." Finally, the house spit her out the front door, just like that. And there she was. And so we wrote it out together like that. And then when it was over, like Sandy said, quiet.
Yeah.
For just a moment or two. Deathly quiet. And then everything started yelling. People, dogs, cows, trees, everything went, ah, like that. But, and I got in on a lot of those barbecues that night, and like Sandy did, I went to the radio, the car radio. There was nothing. And I was working in radio at the time, still do. And so all of a sudden, KSCO radio came on at the time. And the most interesting and wonderful thing happened at KSCO, our local radio station, which had a 10,000 watt generator left over from World War II. So they fired that generator up, and media people from all kinds of different media showed up at KSCO, and they formed a journalist army to get the information out as best they could. And it was so wonderful to have that focal point that, all of the information was coming out of KSCO's generator, whether television or radio or newspapers. It was all out of that 10,000 watt generator, And to have that source of information and how that brought the community together. And that's, if there's ever anything that I remember about that earthquake, besides the shaking and rattling and rolling, was the community that it brought together of these disparate news people, media people. We brought them together in one place. As a matter of fact, a young man and a young woman met each other in the thrill of that battle, fell in love, got married.
Yeah. The ham radio operators also came together, and I was not a licensed radio operator then, and my husband was, but we were not active with our radios then. But since then, I have learned that the ham radio, amateur radio operators, stationed themselves at various places, hospitals, police stations. They also roved the county and gave information over the amateur radio waves, and some of that filtered, I believe, to the local news. The other thing that I have learned is the critical importance of the Watsonville airport, because it was our savior for goods and people in and out. We were isolated. So it worries me, Sandy, going now to people who are making decisions who have maybe forgotten some of that importance, and the city of Watsonville working hard to close the crosswind runway that would allow pilots who are not instrument certified to be able to help us in stormy weather or foggy weather. They would not be able to come. You know something about that, don't you, Michael?
Yes, a little bit. As a matter of fact, with only one choice for a runway, you're pretty much limited, right?
Yeah.
When they take away your alternative runway, and the wind is blowing in the wrong direction, you have to make some pretty critical decisions on whether you can or cannot land.
Yeah.
And it is a wonderful facility given us by the federal government, consequent to World War II. And it was a gift. And it would really be sad to lose that asset to emergency services and business and all kinds of other things too. I'm a pilot, so I guess I'm obviously which side I'm on here. We love our airport, and it was in that time of need. Mm-hmm. It was there for us, and we needed it. When we don't need it, it looks awfully tempting, doesn't it? Think of what we could do. Think of the strip malls we could put in here, right?
And the housing that the state wants us to build, requires us to build. That's what it is. And I remember that it was a critical piece then and in other events that have followed. Having an airport is not a luxury. In my mind, it is a necessity, especially for our county.
Only when it's an event, right? The rest of the time
I'm beginning to train some people here. Well, we don't say disasters, we say events.
Yeah.
Just an event. Opportunity. It's an opportunity.
Opportunity.
You talked about the pins in the wall at FEMA. Well, I visited PG&E's Disaster Central in downtown San Francisco back in the days when they had a big map on the wall. And so, like in Fresno, there would be a pin, and maybe in Visalia there would be a pin, and Santa Cruz County looked like a porcupine.
It does exist.
It's just exactly as you described it, FEMA. And when I saw that, I realized that but for the grace of those people who have only one pin in their county, we would be toast. Mm-hmm. Because there's no way we could afford all of those to fix all of those pins all the time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and as I've wandered through the halls of history over some time, I'm continually convinced that we don't honor, we don't respect the landscape that we use, and that we get impatient with Highway 1 or whatever it is that Highway 1 extracts a pound of time from you every time, and it's not the highway, it's the landscape that they're trying to get through. The nice thing about riding shotgun and not driving is that I can look. When the first Spanish explorers came up this coast, and
it wasn't Cabrillo.
No. Oh God in heaven! So when they'd walked all the way from San Diego, okay,
right.
They'd walked or rode a mule or something, but they were on foot. Father Crespi described this landscape, and he rarely says it, and he's the best of all the journalists. He rarely says anything negative. He rarely passes judgment. He called the landscape tiresome. Because on horseback and on mules and on foot, each arroyo, each up and down, and it's like and when they tried to build a railroad, when they started to build the railroad, this is one of the more expensive railroads that was ever constructed, even in light of the Sierra Nevada, because there's culverts and trestles, and it's just...
And everything's always washing away, too.
Yes. Well, that, periodically. In fact, how many years? 3 years, I think? Frederick Heen, who owned the original narrow gauge railroad, I think it was 3 years before the San Lorenzo trestle went down and drove him into bankruptcy, which was the plan. That was Southern Pacific's plan. Southern Pacific came and looked at it. This is in the late 60s, early 70s, when they're finishing up there, up in the Sierra. And apparently Stanford said that Santa Cruz invited him to come and build between Watsonville. The main line went right by there, Paro, easy deal. And sure enough, Stanford said, no, it's too expensive. So he then went about building it. It's called a Granger Railroad, a railroad that was going to be competing, because Southern Pacific was the octopus, the monopoly. Everybody hated the Southern Pacific. So they were looking for alternatives, and so they built the alternative, and then Southern Pacific usually would put their prices down and then drive the competitor out of business.
Sure.
Okay, but in this case, didn't even have to. The San Lorenzo River ate the trestle. The thing went into bankruptcy. They bought it for $1.
We have a caller. Do you want to accept a caller?
Oh, of course.
All righty, let's see.
Make them identify themselves.
Hello, caller. Can you hear us?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, thank you. Is this Jeff?
Yes, it is.
Hi, Jeff. Go ahead. Welcome to Community Matters, here with Sandy and Annie Lydon and Michael Olson. We're talking about the earthquake in 1989. What do you remember of that?
I've been listening. I thought that maybe I had something somewhat like what Sandy experienced with falling books. At that time, I had a lawyer's office in my own home and was sitting at my desk about 5 o'clock and surrounded by books, some of them all the way up to the ceiling. And sure enough, as soon as things started to shake, the books came tumbling down. But thankfully, perhaps because of our bomb drills back when I was a kid, I dove under my desk. And I didn't really get too much with them. Spent the next several nights sleeping under a table in another room. Well, that's about it. I just wanted to share that, and I loved hearing all the things that Sandy was able to share with your audience. And you did a great job of interviewing, of course.
Oh, thank you. It's easy when you've got such a great guest.
Oh, no,
There's a
stop.
lot
I know, you
of
just turned him
stories.
off. Very good. Well, sign off, and maybe
Well,
someone else.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Do you have any questions for Sandy, Jeff?
No, I don't. I heard a lot. I appreciated every bit of it.
All right, very good. Will you be joining us in the studio at the end of this program? You often come in with the next host. Will you be there?
I'm already here, and I'm going to
Oh.
push you guys out as fast as I can.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you for calling in. And at 5:04, I hope you'll do a little something special and honor the event.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you, Jeff.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other callers? You're welcome to call in 831-265-5050. And we are honored to be here in the studio with Sandy Lydon, Annie Lydon, and Michael Olson talking about the earthquake. But also, we got into a little bit of the history of railroad.
Oh, no.
That's always a good topic.
Like I said, I do it looking backwards.
Yes.
I don't. Yeah, the railroad was a big deal in the 19th century, and I was honored to be involved in the drafting of the interpretive panels on the stretch from Wilder up to Davenport.
Ah.
So I did a lot of work on the North Coast and on the history of the North Coast, and trying to make sure that the Regional Transportation Commission folks got it straight up that way.
Thank you.
And that particular stretch was not built by Chinese. It was built in the 20th century and built by a rather polyglot group of laborers, not just one group, but enormously important.
Yes.
In fact, in some ways, it helped the railroad they built going north, and it was actually almost due north, so it's northwest, up the coast was a really amazing project, because it was planned to be 3 sets of tracks, standard gauge tracks, not narrow gauge. This was not like the little logging railroads and the narrow gauge that the original Santa Cruz Railroad was, but these were 3 sets of tracks, which meant that they had to create a railroad grade that was very wide and able to carry large loads, because they knew, they had planned that the cement plant would be the major carrier of freight until it was completed. The rest of it was completed to San Francisco, which it was not. It never got finished. The North Coast won that one.
Devil's Slide won.
And I call it the Tough Coast. The Tough Coast, or the Rough Coast, because it was able to resist, and not as bad as Highway 1 going south in Monterey County. That one, that's was always successful. But yes. So I worked on that for the Regional Transportation Commission, and it seems like that part of the project has moved forward. Whether they're going to run, I don't know if they're going to run trains on that, and I don't deal with that.
Uh-huh. You do not opine from riding backwards on your history horse.
That's it. My history donkey. It's a there's a Chinese philosopher Lao Tzu, and Lao Tzu is always depicted in paintings as riding a jackass backwards.
Uh-huh.
Which has always been my. That's the direction, and we. I believe we are in our peril. It is to our peril to ignore the history, and the people who are doing things would prefer, and anything would prefer not, to take the historians out and shoot them, because we tend to give them reason to just think about what they're doing, and just give it some, I
don't erase.
Consider where your best intentions might take you.
Mm-hmm.
Well, there you go.
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know about that. I think history's in bad shape these days, and it's in bad shape, and it was a victim of COVID, partly. COVID closed down everything, all the repositories, all the libraries, all the archives, all the places where we do our work, and sources of where we get our stuff, and closed the schools, closed the no history classes, and I'm sure I have to admit, when I was in grammar school and high school, I hated history. Okay, I absolutely hated history.
Do you remember when the apple fell on your head?
What's that now?
Do you remember when the apple fell on your head, and all of a sudden you realized that history was something that?
No, it wasn't an apple. It was a professor, a faculty member at Davis, UC Davis. I went up to Davis. I was a math science hotshot out of high school. And I went to Davis as a physics major, partly because I wanted to be in a smaller department. Both my folks were Aggies. They both had gone to Davis. So it was kind of foreordained. I was a legacy Aggie, which is hard to imagine. Because there were no scholarships or anything. I just went to Davis, and as I got into the physics part of it, I began to realize that, this isn't calculus kind of, there were some things that, and there were right there in the history department, there were a couple of crazies who were teaching out of necessity, teaching required, because I had to take, history was a required class. That's the first strike right there. People are in there because they don't want to be. And I was in there because I didn't want to be. And Turrentine Jackson was his name. And the class that fulfilled the requirement was called the Trans-Mississippi West. U.S. history, the Trans-Mississippi West. We called it Gunsmoke. That was the nickname we gave it, based on the television show at the time. And absolute off-the-wall crazy man. And I thought, this, and compared to the physics guy, and I don't want to be a stereotype, I don't want to do that, and I don't want all the scientists to call in and say, "Oh, that's a stereotype. We don't all have pocket protectors and big Adam's apples." That's not true. But what he did was he used fiction as the readings, the outside readings in the class. He used, and the book that did it was The Octopus by Frank Norris, one of the greatest novels involving California history ever written, about the Southern Pacific Railroad. And I read it overnight. I thought I better read. I had to read it for an assignment in the class, and It got me. I'm in the dormitory lounge. People are trying to get me to leave so they can shut off the lights, but my roommate couldn't stand me having the light on, so I'm driven down and I'm reading this thing, and I'm going, this is it. And I use that book as an alternative reading in my U.S. history classes, and then I just slowly evolved over time over onto the soft side, and I feel very fortunate that I was able to be a teacher in the two venues, one in the high school to begin with. I started teaching in 1961. I was 21 years old, and I'd never taken an education class in my life. And I taught full-time high school, 5 preps, and eventually ended up coaching the baseball team. And I didn't know from nothing. And I apologize, and I will now, to the generation of students on whom I experimented, and it was Mel Brooks and Carl Reiner and their LP record, The History of the United States. Crazy. They had done the 2,000-Year-Old Man, Mel Brooks, absolute genius, and he did U.S. history, and it was hysterical. And I thought to myself, we can make jokes about this too. Maybe this is the way. Maybe you don't come in straight on them. Come in sideways. Sneak it on them. Because every high school history student that I ever saw started out the class with their arms folded, sitting in the chair saying, when is this over? What do I have to do? How long is it going to last? And that was true in my case. And it has to be, and I don't want to say relevant, meaning relevant, but relevant in the, touchy-feely sense, but relevant, it has to mean something to them.
Yeah.
And people were teaching it as if Washington, D.C. meant anything to Californians, and it didn't.
Yeah.
So you can teach things backwards. Oh my God, look at that. I'm looking at the clock. It's
we have these 2 hours have flown by, haven't they? It's been a real honor to have you and Annie in our studio.
Well,
Michael Olson, thank you for joining us.
He's the radio dude.
And here we are on the 36th anniversary of the Loma Prieta earthquake. What are you going to do when you leave the studio?
Maybe go to Costco
with a flashlight in your pocket.
Flashlight, but yeah, exactly, because there's no windows in Costco.
Right.
Good point.
Yeah. Well, I want to thank you for making history come alive for so many people. People walk up to you in parking lots with a flashlight and say, thank you. People walk up and say, I took your classes and they were wonderful. You have walked the bay with people to show them the history from the beach. And I just really want to thank you for all of your work and your passion for keeping things alive.
Because there are times when one wonders whether it matters. But yeah, I've heard enough. I think it's mattered.
It has, and it still does, and it will. You're making a movie now, Chinese Gold.
Yep. There's it's going to be tough to escape us for a while, even though we may be gone.
Well, you're not gone, and you're here, and I want to thank you. And people can watch for your movie.
Right.
And now we're off the air. Thank you very much.
We're off the air, dude. And
Annie, I want to apologize for trying to sneak you on the air.
Well,
listen,
I told